And salutations to our fine podcast audience. Welcome to Three Peas in a Pod, episode 199.
Ooh, we made it.
I realized I was slumped over here, but 199 deserves sitting up.
Oh, wow.
Well, thanks for sitting up, Ed.
I was a little off.
Pay attention.
He'll be slumped again next week during our big party.
No. 200 deserves.
Our big celebration. Is it going to happen?
It's going to happen.
gonna
I have
happen.
confirmation it's going to happen. Pizza is happening.
Well, we're going to enjoy
and we'll
that.
tell you why on the 200th episode, but there's a special reason why I know we're going to have pizza. So
we have
I'm looking forward to that.
reasons.
I've removed the candle.
Yeah, the candle was quite much last week.
It bothered me.
It was a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah. It was a lot to light, and then once you lit it,
It was too much.
woo,
Yes.
yeah, the deep valley smell,
Yeah,
whatever it was.
Whatever it was not good for
We
me.
have other candles.
But this is a
I don't
house
think so.
with,
It's beautiful, Ed.
well,
Thanks for decorating for us.
Okay.
You are the decorator
Yeah, that's
du
right.
jour.
That's what people know about me. I'm going
That's
to
right.
add this right here.
Oh, my Lord.
He's a. Oh, nice! It's symmetrical. I like it. Yeah, Molly would be so proud.
No,
I'm just
she,
gonna-
no, she wasn't. What
I'm
I
just
know
gonna
for
say
sure
this.
is Molly hates that I touched
I
her
was gonna
stuff.
say-
I know she hates I touched her
If
stuff.
somehow Molly ended up watching this, I apologize. I did not stop it.
Yeah.
But it is
Yes.
happening. This is not the order in which these go.
For those
There's a
of you-
lot of
There's
fake
also
plants.
this.
Oh,
For
my.
those of you who haven't seen that, there's
Now
this.
it's just cluttered, Ed. Look what you've done.
Ed
It's
does
like a
not
neighborhood.
understand the concept of addition by subtraction. There's just more addition.
Who are the people
Oh,
in your
shit.
neighborhood?
Yeah, this looks like a neighborhood now.
Yeah.
Whatever. Those of you just listening, there's two plants and two little house structures.
Glass houses.
Glass houses.
These are the trees that we build in suburbs so that our neighbors who we love can't ever bother us.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Well, gentlemen, we have a question that is quite lengthy, so you're going to have to pay attention because there's lots of parts to it. I haven't read it.
It's, I will say this.
I haven't looked at this
I
yet.
just saw it.
On this page with line, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines of
lines.
text.
And there are a lot of, I
And-
see a lot of periods, so it's a lot of sentences. So
right.
separate thoughts.
So do your best, Ed. Lock in.
I'm ready.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Ed gets distracted for those of you who
really
didn't
pretty,
know.
really pretty easy.
So if you send in a long question, he might only answer the first
well,
two words.
I don't know, or the
guarantee
last thing that you
If
answer.
you ask a question early on and it interests me, that's the one I'm
You're
interested
gonna get
in.
that. Well, see if any of this interests you. Here we go. What are your thoughts on bad words? I believe that using the Lord's name in vain is wrong. And really the only bad word outlined in the Bible, though I've not read every page. Okay.
Well, I've read every page.
I have, however, heard others in the church.
I will make a complete statement about it, though I haven't read every page.
Don't mock our question
I'm
answer.
sorry. I'm sorry.
We respect all questions, even this one. Here we go. I have, however, heard others in the church or that our followers say, "Oh Lord," or "Oh God," etc.
Was it me?
Yeah, probably. In ways that
Y'all are not helping me.
Sorry.
All right, I'm
No.
good. I'm on track. Bad words, Lord's name,
And-
might be the only one in the Bible.
There are 3 preachers on this podcast. If you send a long thing in where we have not spoken, we're going to interrupt it.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So I've heard other people in the church say, "Oh Lord," or "God" in ways that I would consider misuse. I'm teaching my children not to say curse words, but I use them myself. No, not in front of them.
Oh,
Okay. Well,
Not in front of them.
that's what matters.
Not in front of them. Okay. And then here's how they end it.
I just want to point out, y'all don't
I
know
love this
this,
question.
but it made Charlie laugh. Too.
I mean,
yeah,
That made Charlie laugh.
I was not expecting
You
it.
won't hear it, but I could hear Charlie laugh, and I loved it.
I love this question. I know this sounds like a really judgmental question, and it isn't meant to be.
Good.
I just want to understand what your opinions are and how you interpret Jesus' stance. Are they really bad, or has society just labeled them that way?
All right, here's what I want to say before we even get to the question. I do want to say I appreciate, because as someone else who kind of writes stream of consciousness, I can tell that's what you're doing.
Yes.
And I do hear the heart behind what you're saying is
Yes, me too.
you're
Me too.
trying to understand, is it acceptable to say bad words? And you specifically mentioned
Yeah, Lord God. and
Yeah,
those kinds of
God's
things.
name in
God's
vain.
name in vain.
And so,
which is an important topic.
I do think we probably have to talk about that concept. But I just want to say, I do understand you trying to wrestle this. If you got kids, I'll say I'm in the same boat. I certainly use lots of language that I have been told by lots of different people, things I didn't know were bad words that people. I also say words I know are bad words.
Well, haven't you found that depending on whose home you're in, there are different standards on bad words?
My mother-in-law has like very specific words that I didn't think were bad.
Me too.
That I'm not, that she prefers me not saying, so I don't say them.
I have said words in front of children even where their parents have looked at me and said, that's a bad word.
I got rebuked in this church for saying shut up.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I thought,
yeah,
dude, my dad would not have been allowed to speak. He said that word all the time.
In that vein, I was rebuked once for saying the word stupid.
Yeah,
because that was somebody's bad word.
So this is how far it goes. I got in trouble for saying pissed, and I didn't even know people didn't like that word. I thought that was an acceptable, like, that's just what you say when you're upset. And I also got in trouble for saying someone screwed up. And I didn't realize there was other connotations to that word. But what I've learned with a lot of those kind of words is it's generational. That screwed up has a very specific connotation if you're in your 50s and older, or maybe even older than that. This person was older than that. But that it does not have for me. I didn't even know that was the connotation of that word.
I assume it's a sexual connotation.
I think so, yes. And so I did not understand that. And so they found it offensive because they thought that's what I was trying to say. And so, anyway, all of those different things. So I understand your heart for this. And certainly when you have children, there are certain words that when they come out of the mouth of a child, you're like, well, no, you can't say that because they do.
So can we all admit here one thing that we've all sort of talked about and that our question writer admitted. Now this is going to get with some of people. What I'm trying to control is a child's behavior that somehow I don't think is necessarily wrong for all adults because, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Which means I'm accepting that when my children get to be an adult, they're probably going to use these words.
Correct. Similar to...
Well, if you want to remain consistent.
Yeah, I use them. You use them. The question writer, and so...
I use them. That's what they said.
So... I'm trying to control behavior of a child, but I don't have a standard that I think should apply to them when they're 25.
Correct.
Or 45.
And what I hear is that this person is trying to figure out what is a good standard. So I'll say this about the
well, if we get to the end of their question, just with where I was going, so what does Jesus have to say? Jesus has no standard that applies to little kids that don't about how we should treat people. So if you really care about what Jesus cares about in how we speak to other people, he doesn't have a standard this is okay for adults to say to each other, but it's not okay for little children to ever say in any context. That doesn't exist that I can think of. I may be overlooking it, but I do not think that exists. If that's the end result,
it's particular to Jesus' stance on the issue. Yes.
So
that doesn't mean that you should expect that adults, maybe the stance should be what you want to set for your kids, you should accept. Correct. My mom had a stance for me that she lived out as far as I have ever known from me or my sisters or any human
into adulthood.
Any human that knew her. She lived out flawlessly.
Yes. Yes.
My dad, not so much.
So here's what I'll say. I want to answer the other part because I think the Lord's name in vain is probably a separate conversation. It's a little longer.
That's a different thing.
But I think we can have it in this. I just wanted to address the first part. So I was just going to say this about the part about with your kids. As someone who's parenting right now, there are things that I say, and my kids have heard me say, that I tell them, hey, that's not appropriate for you to say. And I'm not even talking about specific words. I'm talking about concepts. I have the sex talk with my kids at an earlier age than most parents have with their kids. And I told them, you can talk to me about any questions you have about sex or X, Y, and Z. But if I hear that you are talking and joking with your friends at 7 years old about sex, I'm not going to be okay with that.
That's not appropriate.
That's not appropriate because one, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you have this much information about a subject that is way bigger than, and so you're going to get it wrong.
And I didn't use the language of sin. I do not think it is sinful for them to have these conversations. I do not think it is wise for them to have these conversations, nor is it appropriate. And part of honoring another person is not doing something to them that would somehow cause them to, and I'm trying to say this in a way because everyone's going to poke loopholes. In this particular concept, the way of honoring them is I'm not going to say things that I know upset you unnecessarily. Yes, honoring you sometimes means I have to confront you about things and it will upset you and I need to say those. Saying certain words and talking about, about certain things, right? So I'll give you an example. My mother-in-law doesn't want me ever talking about bathroom stuff at all. Poop, pee, it don't matter. I don't think there's anything wrong with talking about it. I think it's just like if I went to the bathroom and go, oh boy, don't go in there. She thinks that's inappropriate among adults to be having that conversation.
I also know other adults that I have been received emails when we used to do funny videos that involved anything about the bathroom.
So, in order to honor her, there's no time where I need to necessarily, unless I went in, saw something in the bathroom, was like, I need to confront you about this. I think there's something wrong with your health because of something I saw. That maybe I need to talk about it. But in a joking, jovial way, to honor her, I choose not to. My children they do not have the intellectual capacity at this age to understand when is it appropriate to have these conversations, when isn't it. So with certain language, I say, hey, that's not really appropriate for you to say. When you're older, you can make the decision whether you think that's appropriate or not. The way that my wife and I talk about it when we try to have these conversations, because we're trying to figure it out too, is there are certain things. I don't think it's appropriate for them to drive a car at this point in their life because they do not have the capacity to do so, right? Dating's another thing. We talk about that. There are certain things that as they age, once again, it's not like a sinful, is God mad at them?
It's a wise thing.
It's about trying to prepare them as we're talking about. I don't want them to get themselves into situations where other adults and other children look at them and go, oh, I don't like the way they talk.
Yeah,
and now have to deal with that.
And it's been unnecessarily offensive to that person, right?
Yeah. We all know, whether we want to admit it or not, that we all, I mean, this person mentioned judging. All of us are judging all the moment.
Yeah,
we can't stop it.
Yeah.
And particularly when you meet someone new and you're looking to say, are we alike? Are we different? And if a child comes in using language that I don't expect a child to use, there is a thought I have.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's true for an adult.
That's right.
Yes.
There's a thought I have, and most of the time it's not a positive one.
That's right. Yeah. And so I think for a long, long time in my upbringing, I saw this issue as a very, it's a God issue. He's mad at me, or I have sinned outside of His will.
Sin, spiritual,
depending on certain words that I said. There were words that I can remember as a child hearing something on television, and as children do, I mocked it or just without a thought said it. The moment it came out of my mouth, I was terrified. I thought I had now done something that put me at odds with God just by a word that I spoke, and my point in saying all of that is, I don't think that is the heart of what the scriptures are trying to teach us when it talks about our speech.
Correct.
Well, I think more in the vein of when Paul writes instructions to the church, he talks about don't let a single unwholesome word come out of your mouth.
But only.
Yes, what is beneficial for building other people up.
Correct.
So that's a high standard.
Yes, he's modifying unwholesome by what builds others up.
Yes.
So I'll just say this. I've had some of the nicest language spoken to me by people in churches. And by that, if I can't say any of the words they said were sinful, but the way they put them together with the tone that they used to bring them to me, with the the nature of them, the words themselves would all have been, everybody would have approved of them. Their intention was to tear me down.
Yes.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
That is an offense to the body.
Correct.
Yes.
They weren't pointing out an error
Correct.
in hoping that they could help me correct it. There wasn't love in the middle of it. Mm-hmm. So I would think that's the bigger principle we need to teach our our children, our grandchildren, ourselves, is that God's given me the ability to talk to people, and that when I talk to other people, when I'm involved with them, I want to do so in a way that I think will be helpful to them. I want to build them up. It may be correction, but I want to do that in a way. And maybe we're gonna joke, and it might be, and I think I could make a case for this. I know there are people that would disagree, that I use a word that other people might think was off color, but between two of us, because of something we share, is okay. And I know it encourages them.
Yes.
Well,
That it helps
yes.
you.
When I was younger, and I'll say even in ministry, when I was younger in ministry, but certainly like my teenage college years, I thought it was phony to be one way, and I'm once again, everyone not jump on me. In the context of this, to be one way on stage and one way off stage. So if I was up, whatever way I speak privately should be acceptable for me to talk in public. And so and the way that I talk about this is, there are, like you said, there are ways that I talk around our office.
Yep.
There are ways I talk, me and my wife joke with each other, me and my friends joke with each other, that I would never say from the stage.
No.
Not because I think what we were doing was sinful,
That's
or what
right.
they were, but because, and this is the way language just works.
Yes.
Language hits everyone in a very personal way. And so there are words, like I said about pissed off. I still say pissed off because I think most people are now okay with it. But there was a time I didn't know that it was unnecessarily offending people, and they weren't listening to anything else because they thought they knew something now about my character that disqualified what I said. And eventually I learned that's unnecessary. So there are certain languages that I don't want to use. And I'll say there are things that sometimes I'll write stories in, but I know that the story is so into a sermon. I'm so sorry. I'll write a story into a sermon, but I know the story will bring up, it's a little controversial and it'll bring something up. If I'm not going to spend the rest of the sermon explaining that story, I'm not going to throw it in for shock factor because it does not help draw people in the same way I want to use my language. So when I'm speaking to a room of 250 people and I don't know every person and I don't know how they're going to take, I try to be very careful in what I'm choosing to say.
Yep.
But there are rooms I've been in this church that I have used language I would not necessarily use in front of 250 people
That's
that I've
right.
used in front of 25 people.
That's right.
Because I know those 25 people.
And they know you.
That's right.
And they know me. And it's a more casual kind of thing.
Yeah.
So for me, going back to bad words, and that's why I joked when you said, you've heard the person say, oh Lord, or oh God, I go, oh, you're probably talking about me because maybe you know me and you've had conversations and I'm a little more flippant or I'm a little more this. That to me, at 15, I would have gone, oh, that's phony to do that. Honestly, me at 15 would have said, oh, I'm just going to say it on stage to show how not phony I am because I'm going to keep saying it here, so I might as well say it here. And now what I've learned is that's not the job in any of these communications. And just like there are things I don't say to my mother-in-law, there are things I'm not going to say in front of strangers. And that's what my children do not have the capability of understanding. And so we just tell them, we often refer to them as grown-up words. You're going to have to make a decision when you're a grown-up whether you can say that. And then this is what we do that I think you should do with your kids. We explain what the word means. When I hear them say it, I say, because I've said this very regularly, I am about to say a word that a lot of people may feel uncomfortable with.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, but the word is bastard. I was a child. The first curse word I ever remember saying was that word. And I had heard it in a movie. And everyone laughed, or it was a TV show, I think, and everyone laughed. So I was like, well, this is just a funny word.
funny
I was 5, 6 years old, and I was like, this is a funny word. And you just throw this word in and people laugh, right?
Yeah.
Well, I said it to a friend of mine who then went and told their parents, who then, like a narc, told my parents. And I remember my dad sitting me down and saying, here's what this word means. This is what you just called him. And I remember weeping because I remember going, oh, I didn't know this word carries that. And so I say that regularly to my daughters is, hey, when you call someone this, and because they hear things in TV, we talked about that in a recent episode. I let them watch a lot of stuff that has really vulgar language, and then occasionally they repeat it. And they call one of their sisters those names. And I come in and go, this is what you're calling them. I want you to look at them and tell them that's what you think of them. Or do you want to apologize and say, I shouldn't have said that? And then they do. So I would encourage you.
Which then becomes words that build up.
Correct.
And I have to apologize to you, and I have to go, I am now using a language appropriately.
Correct. And so I tell my children, these are words, maybe you hear it on TV, and maybe they're using that way, or maybe they're joking with you, or maybe you hear some grown-ups, maybe even hear grown-ups at church joke with each other and say some of these words. You're not old enough to be able to learn how to use it in a way that builds up. And so I don't think that's appropriate.
Yeah, and
for
until
to
you
say.
can be sure that you can use it in a way that encourages, is loving to the person you're saying it to, you probably shouldn't use it.
So that's at least my approach.
That's
with
the
my kids.
track that I also
Yeah.
wanted to go down, but I don't want us to miss the Lord's name and vain part,
Yes.
which we think I can tell we all think is a separate thing.
Yes, I'll clear the deck. The second commandment of taking the Lord's name in vain is not about language.
It's
That-
not about saying,
It is
"Oh
not
my God."
primarily.
Primarily,
I mean, it
about
is
language.
minuscule
Yes.
about language.
Yes, but we have made that the only thing in our
Correct.
day.
Correct.
People use that commandment and say, well, that means you can't say the word Lord or the word God outside of a context of talking about Him, or therefore you've done some kind of mortal sin.
Well,
right.
That's not what the commandment was about.
I'd say those first, I guess, is the first 4 commandments that are, no other gods before
Yeah.
me. Don't take, the graven images. We all, if you grew up like I did, where you had to at some point memorize the 10 commandments, and the way it was kind of taught to me, at least, was like, make sure you ain't breaking these things, boy.
I know.
These are the big 10. Don't mess it. I would always go, 1 good, 2 good. I ain't got no idols in my house. I'm not allowed to say it, because in my house, this also just shows how ridiculous it is. I always had to say, we had to make sure the sh was on the end of not God. I got to say, oh gosh, golly is okay, but not. And it feels a little silly. There's an Usher song called OMG, but Usher, I believe he was raised Jehovah's Witness. So he very clearly, it's just so silly. It's a song about a woman's body making him say, oh my gosh. So he always puts the S, and I go, how silly is this that you're worried about? You're singing a song about taking a woman from the club home because she's just so hot. And it makes me say this, but I gotta make sure I say gosh, because that would be sinful.
That's right.
That part of this song would be
Yeah.
sinful.
It is crazy.
That's not what the second commandment. What does it mean to take the Lord's name in vain?
It means that if you live in a way that misrepresents who God is, then you have, because in the Old Testament, to bear someone's name was to
Correct.
bear their reputation.
Yes.
It wasn't to necessarily. Now, Ed's right. There's a part of it that talks about speaking His name.
A part of it.
And the Jewish people have been very clear about
Right.
that.
Correct.
Very much more clear than we ever were about speaking the Lord's name. But it was more about bearing the Lord's reputation
Yes.
within yourself and to make that something that is other than what it should be.
Yeah, it's what Jesus is getting at when he tells them about making oaths in the thing. They are taking the Lord's name in vain,
Mhm.
Correct.
even though they want to, get around it with all these little games. When you're trying to attach the Lord to something that you won't want to do directly because you can't really do it, but you want people to think you did it.
Yeah.
Or it's even.
I thought one of the best parts and it's the people, and I'm now doubting starting down this line. It's the people who want to have Christian businesses.
Right.
There are Christians who run businesses. There are no Christian businesses.
Well, and you better be very.
Let's be clear.
Well, and you bet.
Now, clarify or qualify that. because
Jason's really concerned what you're saying about Chick-fil-A.
I think he's.
What?
I agree with
Yeah,
him,
I
but
know.
help us connect that to
When you
Lord's
take
name in the bank.
the moment I say this organization is a Christian business,
Okay.
it is a Christian business, then everything out of that is attached to the Lord.
All right, thank you.
And that can't be.
Yes,
That can't be.
that's right.
Because this business can't even fulfill most of the commands of the Lord.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
We who lead this corporation are Christians who we are going to live in a way that honors the Lord.
Mhm.
And so you can expect that when we personally are doing, but I can't guarantee all of our employees, and for sure this corporation does not
Yeah.
represent Jesus in any
Okay.
way.
So in that way,
It's the same.
that would be taking God's name, reputation, and misplacing it.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Well, and
And that's what taking the Lord's name in vain
Yes.
means. Same thing. I can get where people, if they really begin to understand it, will see that a lot of times we in churches do that.
Absolutely.
We take the Lord and we apply Him to things that this is a good Christian thing. It's just a thing.
Well, and part
that
of
we happen to be doing because we're a church.
part of taking the Lord's name in vain is when you take on someone's name, you are taking on the blessings of that person.
That's
and so
right.
the idea for Israel, you go back to the Old Testament in Israel, is God was saying, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to lead you into this promised land. I'm going to be with you. These tribes are going to try and destroy you, right? But I'm going to be with you. You're going to have my blessing. So don't take that in vain. If you are going to accept the blessing, you then must live according to this. That's why it's so early in the commandments is everything that comes after. If you want the blessing, you live by these things. So another way of taking the Lord's name in vain is to try and hold God to something He did not promise to do. I'm trying to get here's a good example of it. I've had sex outside of marriage. And I'm afraid I got the girl pregnant. I'm saying, God, if you will make sure she is not pregnant, I'm gonna blah blah blah. That is taking the Lord's name in vain. I want the blessing of the Lord, but I have
on a situation that I didn't consult Him on at all.
Correct. Nor do I have real plans in the future to go this. It's the teenager who goes, God, I didn't study for the test. If you'll let me pass this test, I'll go to church every Sunday and I'll blah blah blah. You don't even intend to do that part. It's taking the Lord's name in vain. It is saying, I want the blessings of life with you. I want your protection and your provision and all these things. But I don't have any intention to, as Jason said, actually bear your name in the world.
And I'll just say this, if we would start getting those lines clearer in our mind, do I still attach some things to God that I probably shouldn't? Absolutely. I think I probably still do. And as I try to get God more and more clear on that, help me get clear on that. What happens for sure is I don't use the Lord's name also in vain. The verbal part sort of comes naturally because the bigger issues are the more important issues. But when I start at the pebbles and I pick up a bunch of pebbles, which are all these various different ways that I might be saying something about God or Jesus or something around the way, I just pick up enough pebbles for me to think, I did everything He asked me to do because I sure did pick up a bunch of pebbles. But the bigger issues are still getting caught in my life. This issue that I'm just attaching God to all kinds of stuff.
So, and I know what I'm about to say probably sounds like I'm contradicting everything I said before, but I will say this. In that vein of what you just said, to then take the Lord's name and the name of Jesus even and use it as a curse word.
Correct.
Right.
Is also taking it in vain.
Yes, of course it is.
So that's the thing that, I'll be clear. When I watch a movie or a television show and the person, something bad happens and they yell Jesus' name.
Yeah.
My heart just kind of...
It hurts.
Yeah, that's right.
It hurts.
That's right.
Because in that moment, they have done that, not because they just uttered His name, but in what they attached Him to.
That's right.
Does that make sense? So
Absolutely.
I know that might sound like a distinction without a difference.
I'll say I have the same thing happen.
Ed just he gets geared up and then he realizes.
Oh, there are going to be people. If I see a pastor who has some monetary blessing in his life and it's just over the top, and he talks about the blessing of the Lord falling on him when a mile down the road from him, I go, man, how Jesus would be there.
Yeah.
Jesus would be over with these people who do not have. I don't believe it feels like you're trying to feel good about something you did by putting Jesus on it.
Yeah, I think.
Don't blame me. It was Jesus. Again.
Yeah, Jesus gave me all this money. I had to have that. I mean, if Jesus gave you all this money, wouldn't you buy a plane?
Yeah, absolutely. Gulfstream jet. That's all Jesus.
Yeah, that's just the way Jesus rolled. The guy that didn't have a place to lay his head.
Yeah.
That guy who was homeless, yeah, he'd have Gulfstream. Okay. Absolutely he would.
But I think that does get to what we've been talking about this whole time. I think with any kind of language, that's where I try to come back to. I try not to, even when I deal with other people, and there are things they say that I go, I wouldn't have said that, or, I wouldn't have said it that way. To me, language is really important, which is why it's really important for me. I am trying to learn these days, may not seem that way, to be slower to speak, because I realize how carelessly I've said things that no one would have been offended by because I didn't use vulgar language, but the person I was speaking to, it probably wounded them very deeply because I just found a way to craft it. Or I flippantly said something. This is what's even worse. I know why James says at times that teachers will be held more responsible. There are things I flippantly have said because I needed to fill the space on this podcast, or because I wanted to sound smart, on stage, that people took very seriously. And I look back and I go, oh, I didn't even really mean that. I just wanted to kind of say something clever. And I'm trying to get more careful about that. And in particular, when you talk about saying the Lord's name in vain, I think the heart behind that, as we said, even around bad language, vulgar language, is that it is not meant to build up. So I want to be very careful in how I say things. But like we've said, I don't think Jesus is as concerned with, I think culturally there is, because language is cultural, there is a different feeling around, oh my gosh, or oh my God, than there was even 20, 30 years ago. I don't think that's as much as what God's concerned about as he is about, maybe, like you said, I've had to say this to my girls because they've heard it on TV. I said, I'm not as, so you'll hear my kids, I'm not as hard on the oh my God as I am. I've heard them before, just repeat from TV, Jesus Christ. And they'll say, and I'll say, Jesus' name is so precious. Let's not use it like we're saying a bad word. Let's try and make it a good word, and do that. Because once again, I don't think, oh my God, fits that way culturally anymore.
And I think parenting wise, just the tone you had just then, which I assume is the tone you use, that's the tone I would use with my kids is, hey, it's instructional. Hey, I know this is the way this goes, but we love Jesus in this place. And,
there was you'll love this, Ed. This is a throwback. When I was youth minister, I used to take the young people to like these conferences, and there was this group, a drama group called One Time Blind.
I remember One Time Blind.
Remember them? Well, they had a sketch. They would do these sketches to make a point, and it was like an overblown thing to make a point. Well, one of the sketches, one of the guys is hanging out with his friend, and every other word, he's just like, oh my Larry, and he's just using the word Larry as a curse word. And the guy finally stops him, and he goes, well, Larry's my dad.
Oh.
And the point they were trying to make in this sketch is whenever you say God's name or Jesus's name, you're taking, and it was a good point. I think it was a little overblown.
A little overblown.
But that's you made me think of that.
That's right. That's good.
Well, and so I would just encourage you with yourself. I have had to get very careful too. If you had known me even 5-6 years ago, it was a different case for me. I'm trying to become more careful about what I'm saying because I think sometimes we forget how much we internalize these words that we're saying in the way that I think about this person I'm speaking about. And I think that I'm joking about them, but there's a way in which the reason I did choose that word. And it's different than what we're talking about of like when I'm talking to my friend and we have a little, all of that. I'm talking about when I'm a little frustrated with someone and I'm talking to my wife and I might call them something or I might say something and she knows I'm joking and I don't really mean it, blah, blah, blah. There's a way I've internalized that. And so I try to be very careful now not to use certain words because they strike me a certain way. And as we said on the episode about media, if I feel convicted, I probably just need to get better about it.
Yeah.
And so I know now it feels like we've come full circle on the thing we're saying. I don't think the words themselves are sinful. I think there is a cultural nature to them. And if the reason I am trying to really investigate my language, why did I say that word?
Yes.
Did I think it would build that person up? Because I'll say this, with certain of my guy friends, kind of joking that way, there is a building up nature to it because it makes us feel like, man, we're close. We can joke with each other kind of roughly.
People who are my friends, joking that's the way I know you.
And we're more vulgar and crude than I would be.
I have friends that I can walk into the room and say, you are an ugly fat SOB. Yeah. And they would love it.
Yeah.
We would laugh.
Yeah.
Right.
I could never walk in and say that to my wife. Nor would I want to.
If you just cannot be in the room
Nor
just to watch that reaction, that would not. I know your wife. She would not. She would not put up with that from you.
She wouldn't. and she shouldn't.
No, she shouldn't.
But my point is,
It's a difference between men and women. Like
It is.
you and I have a friend that I hadn't seen. He came up here during COVID, Billy, and I love Billy and always have. Haven't seen him in years, but he and I were very close at one time. And that day, he leaned over to me and whispered and said, "You going to name that gut?"
that's all.
And I was like, and I busted out laughing like that. And I go,
awesome.
"Did you name yours?"
Exactly.
That's great.
So I would encourage you that's the tension you're trying to figure out. You want to make sure your language is building other people up, and you want to make sure that as a parent you're creating, because you are habituating for them. You in the way you speak and the way you do, you're showing them how you do that. And so I try to not hide the way I speak in front of my kids, and I can tell, they can see when I'm with certain people, and they can see how they respond, and they see how it goes. And I'm hoping one day they'll make similar decisions. And so none of us are perfect.
Nope.
Let me add one thing about the money.
All right.
Oh my goodness! I just try to be careful. God does bless us monetarily, and He gives us some things to enjoy. I wasn't saying God doesn't bless you to enjoy some of what you have.
Okay.
That's clearly spoken by Paul and Timothy.
Thank you for the disclaimer.
There's further evidence of what you should also do when you are blessed with money.
The rest of the disclaimers that Ed remembers will be in the description.
That I now feel bad about
Yes.
things that I should have
Yes.
just not said.
Great conversation, gentlemen. And
Thank you for the question asker.
very
'cause
much
that was
appreciate
a very good
That
discussion.
was a great discussion. I don't think we've had that one.
That was a very wordy question. We appreciate it very much. Send us another paragraph or
Send us many more. However, next week we will not be answering those questions because
It's our 200th
it's a
episode.
200 episode.
We made it.
We made it. Come back next week and you will celebrate along with us. We'll be celebrating you, our fine audience that has lifted us to the 200th episode.
We do it for the fans.
Right. So have a great one. See you next
We're
time
going to wake Charlie up and turn this one
on
on.
number 200.